Thanks so much. Thank you. Cheers. Cheers. Happy birthday, Baker Street. That's not very good, is it? Go. Say yes, happy birthday. Oh, I'm glad somebody back there. Right, I'm going to talk about my favourite subject, which is HMOs. And I might talk a bit fast. I'd like to thank Ranjan for inviting me to come along. I better stand out the way so people can see this. I don't want to be standing in front of the screen so you can't see what's going on. I'm going to talk about commercial to residential. It's something I did about 10 years ago, and then the government decided that what I did was very good and they'd introduce it. So that's been introduced for the last few years. But not many people have realised about it, except in the southeast. You're very different down here. I'm outside the southeast. As Ranjan says, I'm in a place called Wednesbury, which is north of Birmingham, south of Wolverhampton. It's west of Walsall and east of Dudley. So it's in the middle of really nowhere. And I do quite well by operating there. Some of you may not have heard of me, but apparently you all have. No one admitted to not doing so. I've been doing HMOs for years. I can't think of doing anything else. I enjoy it. There's nothing better I can see. There's no easier way of making money, and I love to talk about it. I like to write about it. I've written loads of books on the subject. In fact, you're being asked about your questions on HMOs. Well, I've already written a book called 101 Questions on HMOs. Manoj over there, he's just drifting off to sleep. Yeah, as beautifully modelled by Manoj, there's 101 questions. I've also written the sequel, more 101 questions, and I've nearly finished the sequel to that, which is even more 101 questions. I'm up to my fourth one, so there's plenty of questions out there that people want to ask. So a lot of interest in the subject, and I've written about it, because I just love it. I like talking about it. I'm sure if you cut me like Blackpool Rock, you'll find it just runs through me. But I want to share with you some awesome opportunities that I discovered about 10 years ago, but the government have slowly decided to follow it. And that is to be able to do prior notification. The government realises the reason the shortage of accommodation is because of the planning system. So instead of doing the right thing, just lining up all the planners and shooting them, they don't. They just bring in this sort of wishy-washy changes called prior notification, which says that you can turn certain types of buildings, providing it fits into the strict criteria, which of course the planners police. So why don't you just say, turn all properties into residential if you want to, and you'll end the housing crisis. Won't be very good for me, but it'll be good for my heart, because there'll be no more homelessness, and you bring down the price of housing. Maybe not such a good idea. So perhaps the planners are not such a bad thing in the first place. But here's an opportunity to take, shall I say, grotty properties and make good use of them. So how can you do that? You can take certain types of commercial properties, which my favourite is offices, into residential. You can turn shops into residential. You can turn agricultural buildings into residential. You can turn distribution centres into residential. And then by residential, it can be houses, flats, and then, guess what? I then multi-let them, and there's nothing to stop you doing that. But you could stop at houses, you could stop at flats, you could sell them on as houses or flats. I even turned a building, I got the prior notification process passed, and I was offered money just because I had the ability to turn it into residential. I'm just going to keep an eye on the time, because I've been told I've got to behave myself and keep to time. You can also, some of you just say, well, hang on, it's commercial, that sounds very expensive. Well, yes, commercial properties can be expensive. But outside the southeast, people are desperate to get rid of their properties. So you get them for nothing. Now, you may think that a bit strange, but it's only in the southeast people think property is worth having. Come and visit me up in my part of the world, and you'll find people who've got commercial properties, and they will give it to you. They will give you these properties. Anyone got a clue why? Pardon? Rates, yes. Business rates are crippling. Even if the property is empty, and outside London, you've got this vast heartland of property, which used to be manufacturing and is now, what? Empty. Empty. And they're having to pay business rates on it. They're also having to pay insurance. And strangely enough, insurance costs more than it does if it's occupied, even though people can fall downstairs, so empty property costs more. And you won't have this down here because you're all posh around this part of the world, aren't you? But you've got people in my area who like to go round and recycle things, like copper and wiring and any metal in the building. So you find the building is stripped. Of course, you've never heard of that problem, but you go further north, they don't bother putting copper in it anymore because it just goes straight out. They put it in plastic to get round this problem. You can also take these properties on leases. It's a bit like rent to rent. You're all aware of rent to rent. I don't think anyone knows this. But instead of calling it rent to rent, you lease it. And you can get leases with periods of rent-free periods of a year, 2 years, or even longer. So you can acquire these properties with just no money. You're just taking over the liability for this property by paying the business rates, except you'll get out of that, and you'll insure it. But because it's now residential, the cost of the insurance will come tumbling down. And a lease doesn't have to be that long. 50 years, though, if you have a chat with, I can't remember the company who's doing bridging there, they want 60 years. So you don't have to have a long lease to be able to get finance on the property. People don't realise that. They think you have to own it or have a 99-year lease because they think residential. Commercial works totally different on that. And it also has certain advantages for the owner to acquire that. Now, when I acquire a building, I want to get all my money back out. It's just a habit I picked up when I had no money and just carried on doing so. So I may have to put money into the building to buy it and to convert it, but I want to get all that money back out. So in effect, I'm getting my property for free. I just exchange all the money it's spent on the property for debt. And I often get more money out. At the same time, you're paying for a mortgage. But the income I get from multi-letting the properties makes such awesome income that you still make a profit. So you end up with a property for nothing. I'll show you how that works. Here's one I did earlier. I'm sure some cook said that before. Was it Fanny Craddock or something like that? And here's one I prepared earlier. New Street, an office block. It cost me £110,000. I turned it into 14-bed HMO. It cost me 100 grand to do it. So it cost me almost as much to convert it as to buy the property. So purchase 110, conversion. So total, you good at maths, are you? 210, you got it? You're ahead of me? Right, now, I rented that out. I'm making 58,000. Now, the investment value, because commercial buildings operate differently to residential. They're valued on the income they produce, and we call this investment value. And it's the way that all commercial buildings are valued, on the income they produce, not the bricks and mortar value. Now, who decides this is this lovely person called a valuer. I won't say anything nasty about valuers, but you put 10 valuers and show them a building, and they'll come up with 15 different values for it. So it's a really good science. But I'm going to show you how all to become values. Would you like to become values? Yeah, right. It's very simple. You just multiply the gross rent by a figure of between 6 and 16. Now, simple. That's it. Multiply 6 to 16. How do you decide whether it's 6 or 16? Well, that's down to the valuer. And if anyone lives in a particular area, I'll give you a clue. But in my part of the world, it was, a few years ago, 10 times income. So can we keep to 10 times income? But you down here, the posh part of the southeast, yeah, you be looking at 12, 14. 16 times is really for good quality student accommodation. That goes for a premium. But you should be quite comfortably say, this will rent out for X, and I can multiply it by, say, 14 times. But my part of the world, it's 10 times. Now, we establish the value of the building. The banks will lend 70%, up to 70%. Some will lend more. It's a changing market. And you've got to remember, when I'm explaining this to you, and I get frustrated explaining it to people, does anyone understand psychology or whatever it is? One of the great problems I have is I tell you this is what happens, and no one believes me. Because they go and talk to the expert. You know, the expert in the pub who's half pissed, and he says you can't do that. So they believe them. Rather than coming up and seeing me, and I show you can do it. I can show you the valuation. I can show you the mortgage statement where they lent the money. It does happen. They even ask people like mortgage brokers. Now, mortgage brokers are dear, lovely people, but some of them don't get the figures. They only do buy-to-let lending, and they don't understand commercial. So they say, you can't do it. So you can borrow 70%. Now, remember, it's valued at $546,000. You can borrow $380,000, up to $380,000. So that gives you a problem. You've got a wad of cash left over. Are you following the plot? You've got money left over after borrowing this money, surplus of $170,000. So you can see why I look like a smug bastard. I'm buying property, and it's making money for me, and I'm cashing out as well. Would you like to see some other deals? I have to go quickly because I'm being timed on this. I didn't know I got through that time. Having such good fun. Here's one I bought for 100k. Bought it in auction about a year ago. Conversion cost 140. Sorry about it, it's all get a bit fudged. But the lender at that time was lending 20 years, and you could fix for 20 years at the time, so it cost 19,000. So here's the figures. Oh, it's got all a bit meshed. But let's look at the bottom one. Look at the profit. You're making about 60k, even though you've got a 20-year repayment mortgage. Understand that one? You can do that. So you're still making 60k, and you have paid it off in 20 years. Sorry about the slide going that way. So it's valued. How would you value it? You're now awesome valuers, aren't you? How much does this property value out at? 800,000. 10 times 80 is 800,000. Believe the power you got. You now know how to value properties. You can see why it values up at 800,000. You could cash out 320,000 on this one. So every time you buy a property, you make more money, and it gives you the best part of, could do, 60k income. If you didn't have a repayment mortgage on it, you'd be doing okay. So you're still making a profit on that property. That's a nice one. Yep. It's jammed now. Your battery's running low. This is your computer going. Anyway, I'll just ad-lib for a moment while we're getting the power going back up again. I can help you do this. Not only do I do it for myself, so I'm not here just saying, look at what I do, but if you want to do it, I'm there to help you. So if you're going to have a word with Manoj afterwards, we can show you how you can learn how to do this and achieve this for yourself. It's jammed. What else do I want to say? Don't worry, I'll stop there. I was going to show you some more examples on how to do this. Any questions you want to ask while I'm ad-libbing?
We do it at in the Q&A.
Right, okay. All right. You don't have to also think about this as being just what happens in my part of the world. You can do it down here. I came down early because I'm coming down to London. So went over to Heathrow, had a look at a commercial building, offices. Now, what can you do with offices? Under prior notification, you can turn it into residential without or with planning permission. No, you just fill in a form. It costs you 80 quid, and the local authority have to give you permission to use it as residential. Now, the big difference between your part of the world and my part of the world is I can do it for under $250,000, while this one costs 2.6 million. But the same thing operates. You can get all your money back out, except you can cash out probably 400,000 on that deal. On top of that, you can make around about £250,000 a year from income. Now, I know you get high wages down here, but I think most of you would think an income of £250,000, turning an office block into residential, you can do it. And the finance is available. They're falling over you to give the cash to be able to do it. And most of the time, you can do it with very little money. What you need to do is grow some awesome, I have to use the polite term. What's the polite term for balls? I can't remember. Mahonis. To do this. It's there. I got it on a delayed completion. In other words, I don't have to pay any money for it. Put £1 down as the deposit, the building is yours, convert it, and you yourself can cash out. So that's very simple. If you want to know more about it, come and have a chat with me. It's not an illusion. Don't ask anyone else whether you can do it, because they will say, no, you can't. Come and talk to people who walk the talk, who do it. So tonight, you can all give up your jobs and become awesomely wealthy. Thank you.